That day, I didn't know a small mistake would unravel into something that would change my life forever. It started innocently enough, with a bouquet of lilies and roses wrapped in a brown paper cone, something I had carefully chosen because flowers had always been the way I expressed emotions I couldn't put into words. My hands had trembled when I scribbled the note, not because it was grand or poetic, but because it was raw and vulnerable, and I was never good at that, telling someone how much they meant to me. The flowers were meant for Emma, my best friend who I had been secretly in love with for years. She had just gotten a new promotion at work, and while she celebrated with her colleagues, I sat in my apartment, thinking about how much she had done for me over the years, how she was the one who believed in me when I quit my job, how she picked up the phone every time I spiraled into self-doubt, how she laughed at my worst jokes when no one else cared to listen. I wanted the flowers to be a way of saying thank you, and maybe, just maybe, a way of testing the waters for something more. So I wrote the card, signed my name, and asked the florist to deliver it to her building across the street. But that night, when she texted me, there was no mention of the flowers, no thank you, no surprise message. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe she hadn't received them yet, but 2 days later, still nothing. My heart sank, and the embarrassment of confessing my feelings without a response began to eat at me like rust spreading across metal. What I didn't know, however, was that the flowers had ended up in the wrong apartment, one floor down to be exact. And that small twist of fate was about to pull me into the kind of story that you only read about in novels, the kind you never think will happen to you. On the third night, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I was still in my worn-out gray hoodie, the one with a hole in the sleeve, sitting on the couch with a half-empty cup of coffee, replaying old conversations with Emma in my head. The knock came again, firmer this time, and for a second, I considered ignoring it. But something pulled me toward the door, and when I opened it, she was standing there, a stranger, holding the bouquet I'd sent, the flowers now slightly wilted but still intact. She had long dark hair that fell messily over her shoulders, and her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. She wasn't the kind of woman you immediately notice for her beauty, but something about her presence felt magnetic, as though the weight of her sadness carried a gravity strong enough to pull you in. She looked at me, her lips trembling as if she was on the edge of saying something but couldn't find the words. Then, finally, she whispered. These were delivered to me by mistake. But I think maybe they weren't a mistake at all. I froze, every thought I had scattered like loose papers in the wind. Who was she? Why was she here? And how could something so ordinary, flowers, carry such heaviness in her eyes? Before I could even respond, she stepped forward, holding the bouquet out toward me. I reached for it slowly, my fingers brushing against hers, and for a split second, I felt a jolt, like an electric current that wasn't physical but emotional, an exchange of something unspoken. I don't know why I'm doing this, she admitted, her voice fragile yet determined. But those flowers, they saved me this week. I was going to do something terrible, and then they showed up at my door. My breath caught in my throat. She didn't need to say it outright. Her eyes told me what she meant. She had been on the edge of giving up. My mistake, my careless error in writing the wrong apartment number, had landed the flowers in the hands of someone who desperately needed a reason to hold on. And in that moment, I felt both the weight of what she was saying and the strangeness of fate pressing down on me. I invited her in without thinking, my apartment suddenly feeling too small, too unprepared for a moment like this. She stepped inside, clutching the flowers like a lifeline, and sat down on the edge of my couch. I offered her coffee, though she shook her head, her gaze fixed on the bouquet as though it was something sacred. I don't know who you meant these for, she said, her voice breaking, but they came to me when I needed them the most. I don't think I'd still be here if they hadn't. My mean spoon. This wasn't about Emma anymore. This was about a stranger whose life had been altered by my mistake. Her vulnerability was raw, like an open wound she had decided to show me without warning. And though I didn't know her name, I felt something stir inside me, a sense of responsibility, of connection, of fate playing its strange hand. For the rest of the night, she told me her story, how she had moved into the apartment recently after leaving an abusive relationship, how she felt invisible in a city full of people who never looked her way. How she had spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if anyone would even notice if she disappeared. And then those flowers came, she said, tears rolling down her cheeks. They were addressed to someone else, but when I read the note, when I read the words, "You matter more than you know," I felt like the universe was speaking directly to me. I had forgotten what I wrote on that card, but hearing her repeat it now made my chest tighten. Words meant for Emma had found a new home, and maybe, just maybe, they were always meant for her. By the time she left that night, I hadn't even asked her name. All I knew was that she was someone who carried pain like armor, someone who had been broken but hadn't yet given up. When I closed the door behind her, I stared at the flowers she had left behind, the petals beginning to curl, and I realized that my mistake wasn't just a mistake. It was the beginning of something neither of us could have predicted. And deep down, I knew she would be back. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. I couldn't stop thinking about her. That knock on my door 3 days after I had mistakenly sent flowers to the wrong apartment had already turned my ordinary, monotonous life into something I never expected. The girl's name was Emily Carter. She had this aura about her that felt both fragile and unshakable, as if life had battered her, but she still stood firm with quiet grace. After she returned the card, we ended up talking for nearly 2 hours that night, something I hadn't done with anyone in years. But part of me kept wondering, why did she really show up? Was it just about the flowers, or was there more to the story? Over the next few days, Emily and I began to see each other more often. Sometimes she'd drop by after work. Sometimes I'd find myself wandering to her floor with no real excuse. She worked at a bookstore downtown, and she had that kind of mind where every story somehow tied back to her own life. Her voice was soft, but her words were sharp enough to leave a mark. I noticed the small details, the way her fingers always traced invisible shapes when she was nervous, the way she tilted her head when listening, the faint scar on her wrist she never spoke of. But then came the moment that shook me. One evening, while sitting in her small living room, I noticed a shoebox tucked halfway beneath her couch. The corner was peeking out like it had been shoved in a hurry. She caught me staring at it, and her entire face froze, the warmth draining out instantly. "Don't touch that," she whispered, her voice trembling. The room suddenly felt colder. I wanted to ask what it was, but her eyes, they pleaded with me not to. I didn't press. Instead, I let her change the subject, though the box stayed in the back of my mind like an unanswered question. Days passed, and our connection deepened. We shared stories of childhood, heartbreak, dreams we never admitted to anyone else. I told her about my loneliness, how I'd been drifting through life without purpose, sending flowers only because I wanted to remind myself I could still feel something. She listened without judgment, as if she understood that kind of emptiness all too well. But Emily was always holding something back. Behind her smile, there was a shadow. The answer came one stormy night. She knocked on my door, soaking wet, clutching that shoebox like her life depended on it. "I need to show you something," she said, her voice breaking. Inside the box were dozens of letters, some opened, some sealed. They were addressed to her, but not from anyone alive. They were written by her late fiancé, Daniel, who had died 3 years earlier in a car accident. The flowers I had sent, the ones that mistakenly ended up at her door, were delivered on the anniversary of his death. That's why she came to me, not because of the flowers themselves, but because she thought it was a sign. Her tears fell as she read one of his letters aloud, her hands shaking. "He always told me," she whispered, "that I'd know when it was time to let go. When something unexpected would happen, something that would feel like him sending me forward." She looked at me then, her eyes red but burning with a strange kind of hope. "When your flowers came, it felt like him, like he was telling me to open the door, and you were standing there." My throat tightened. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't anyone special, just a man who messed up an address. But in that moment, I realized the accident of those flowers had carried more weight than I could ever have imagined. From that night onward, things shifted. Emily began to breathe easier, smile wider, as though the grip of the past had loosened its hold on her. We started to build something real, something fragile, yes, but beautiful. I wasn't replacing Daniel. I wasn't supposed to. Instead, I was simply walking beside her as she learned how to live again. Weeks turned into months. One evening, as we sat on our balcony watching the city lights, she slipped her hand into mine and whispered, "You changed everything." You gave me back the courage to open my heart. My own chest ached because the truth was she had changed me too. I wasn't drifting anymore. I had found an anchor in her. Looking back, I often wonder what life would have been if the flowers had gone to the right address. I would have continued on my lonely path, unaware of the woman just one floor below who was waiting for a sign to begin again. But fate, or maybe something greater, intervened. A wrong delivery, a fragile box of letters, and a knock on my door were enough to rewrite both of our stories. And so, to you watching this, sometimes the smallest mistakes can lead to the biggest changes in life. Maybe the universe has its way of guiding us, even when we think we're lost. So tell me, do you believe in accidents, or do you think everything happens for a reason? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your one click might just be the sign someone else needs today.